Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to, we really do hope, make some or a lot of money, whether the market's going up or whether it's going down like it is today. Loaded up for discussion, we have Bitcoin selling off after seemingly positive strategic reserve news. We'll dive into why we think that might be the case. We've got XAI Grok launching its first token, DRB on base. We'll explain what has happened there. And then finally, CT legend Degen Spartan returns with Egirl Capital essay called Survive. Brad will be taking us through some of the core messages there, which might be pertinent on a day like today when the market is not playing ball. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs as usual, plus a general discussion on market rotations and where liquidity is going. So stay tuned for that. I've got Legendary and Brad with me as co-host. We're ready to get into it. But just a reminder, friends, before we do, nothing that we say on this show is financial advice. This market is very, very risky. No one knows anything for sure, least of all us. So please proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it's Monday. It's the 10th of March. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. Excited for the new week. Although I am a bit surprised that we live in a world where BTC is still trading at 82K, yet CoinMarketCap is at extreme fear. The index is at 17. That's a bit wild, but
do you think we've broken the index? Do you think the index is broken? Or do you think it's still a good indicator?
I think a lot of things are broken in our simulation right now. The indicators are broken. The politics are broken as well. I don't know if you've seen it. The White House, I've seen this press release basically by the White House, which read last night. I'm just going to keep it super short. President Donald J. Trump highlighted many of the egregious examples of waste, fraud, and abuse funded by American taxpayers, including $8 million spent by the Biden administration for making mice transgender. And then it continues to say, in bold, the fake news losers at CNN immediately tried to fact check it, but President Trump was right as usual. That's an official released statement by whitehouse.gov. And that's the simulation we are living in.
Broken system. That's, I guess it's kind of hilarious, but also tragic in some way. Like there's just strange things going on. The thing I was thinking specifically is that fear and greed indicator. The reason why I think it's broken at the moment is that people are so volatile. Like people's emotions seem to be so volatile at the moment, just swinging either way. And I don't know. I appreciate I haven't been here as long as other people, but I just haven't been here at a time when, as you said, Bitcoin's at 82. Like it's not that bad. But then seemingly as soon as it dips, everyone wants to pile on leverage straight away. So it's like it does bounce, but then everyone's on super high leverage and then it pulls back again. So I know what you mean. Brad, how are things with you? Are you how much are you paying attention to all of that stuff? How are things on your side? How's New York? What's going on with you?
Yeah, presently in the Big Apple, still in the Big Apple. I wasn't aware of any of the official release stuff. Am I surprised by it? No. Was not aware of it. But yeah, it's kind of a sign of the times. Yeah, honestly, you guys know my general position on this stuff. So like the market itself being topsy-turvy, I could not be less aware. I will confirm though, New York is a pretty decent hub relative to like, I'm from the Midwest, right? So like it's all fields and like cows and shit there. I just moved to the West Coast. There's less cows, still some fields, mountains and shit. I'm not used to being around like actual industry crypto people. There's a lot of fucking industry crypto people here in New York, like, just hanging out with the team, doing stuff, to help like pushing through testnet, whatever else. And just like random people coming in and seeing them, saying what's up, like just people that you see on the timeline a lot that just like are in New York, because a lot of people are in fucking New York. That's pretty cool.
How are you finding it? You find that like a helpful thing? I remember when I first was like full-time in the space. I know London is not a great example because I don't think London is as relevant on the global stage now, at least for crypto. But there was a feeling that I had, at least for a period of time, which was I think it would be super helpful to be in the city, like literally in it. I lived like super centrally for a while, because it will just be easier, be able to mix around, take meetings, bounce around between, and kind of hang out with people. But we do a lot of business async here.
Yeah,
a lot,
it doesn't
a lot.
change like any of my enthusiasm or like even necessarily I guess it changes the conversations a little bit. It helps peel back the curtains a little bit on like just like how people are thinking about a lot of this stuff, and I think that's helpful. Like just for instance, like even like just talking to the guys at Dragonfly, like just like getting more long form context on like how they're viewing all of this shit, and frankly, and this talking to other VC firms, these guys are fucking degens, man. Like they're in the trenches, like more than I previously would have allowed myself to like accept. It's kind of wild, yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I guess you can never get that context. The degen activity probably doesn't make it into their like official reports.
Some of it do, like some of it does. Like we just don't have exposure to it. Like, and this is not talking about Dragonfly specifically. It's just like
Sure.
VCs in general. Because I've talked to a few over the last couple of days while I've been here, and like, yeah, like they're just like, and it's like there's just so much fucking money flying around. There's like, yeah, it got blown up on Fartcoin. It's like what, like you even deployed it, like like in my mind. I still have a hard time realizing that in our industry, it's so topsy-turvy that like that's a legitimate thing, that like if you're trying to make money and you're a capital deployer, like you run a liquid fund, like you gotta have fart exposure. It's like,
imagine if you didn't have fart exposure this
yeah,
cycle, how would you answer to your LPs?
yeah, bro. I mean, it makes sense in hindsight. It's just like me not being a trader, and then like I guess not realizing the magnitude and like what like the games you have to play if you're like that's your game. I don't know. It's just, for me, it's as a technical enjoyer and debater, it's funny to see that side of the house.
One thing I'd be super curious, we'll get into the headlines in a sec, but one thing I'd be super curious if you were going to be hanging around there for longer to find out. People have been speaking a lot in general about this industry, how like, look, everyone wants to be a VC here. You get in super early, you get to sell super high, low float, high FTV, you get a beautiful exit, and been speaking a lot about how we need more liquid funds. Like, fine, everyone wants to be a VC, but we need more liquid funds. Do these people intend on being liquid funds? What proportion of their funds are kind of early stage versus liquid? That balance, I think, is something that will be super interesting to observe moving forward.
Yeah, I'll poke around.
Yeah, interested. Another argument there is that, well, if you want liquid funds, you've got to make better products, is that they actually want to bid liquid. So I think that's pretty fair too. Let's get into the liquid markets, get you up to with everything that's been happening. Started with the price action, as always, with the majors. Not necessarily a pretty picture, guys. As you probably already know, Bitcoin is down a couple of percent to 82. It's not that bad, all things considered. In the last week, it's down 11%. ETH is down 1% to 2.1 now. I'm just going to refresh because just to double check that's live. Yep, 2.1, down 1%, down 10% on the week as well. XRP is down a few percent to $2.10, down 18% on the week. BNB is at 560. Solana is at 127, down 6%, down 20% on the week. So probably the biggest faller in the last 7 days. Getting into the meme coin side of things, we have Doge down another 6% to 17 cents. This is almost giving up all the gains of the cycle, if that's what you want to call it that at this point. Down 20% on the week. Pepe up 1%. Trump's down a few percent. Bonk is down 5%. WIF is down a few percent. Pengu's down another 6%. Okay, pretty much carnage here as well, guys. SPX, Murad's coin, down 21%. Fartcoin, Bread's VC's coin of choice, down 10%, 33% on the week. Hard viewing there on that side. Can't say, pretty much on trend. Everything is in a similar vein there, to be honest. Getting into the headlines themselves, which I think are pretty important to say. Bitcoin is selling off after seemingly positive strategic news. I think there's a bunch of fears around Fed policies, whether that's to do with spending, whether that's to do with war. We'll dive into those in a bit more detail in just a bit. XAI Grok launches its first token, DRB, on Base. It reached 15 million market cap. It was another one of those that came out of the banker bot, which is an interesting protocol where you kind of get given, everyone has a wallet assigned to their X profile, and you can kind of create tokens in that way. Legendary will dive into that in a little bit later. And then finally, CT legend Degen Spartan returns with Egirl Capital SA Survive. Said crypto used to be a winner's game. Above average levels of technical savvy was required to participate and to win. Today, I postulate that crypto has evolved largely into a loser's game, where simply surviving is all you need to do to win. Brad will be sharing some thoughts and key takeaways from that a little bit later. Very, very important, I think, to reflect in that way at this, wherever exactly we are in the market. I think it will be interesting to hear that. Legendary, is there anything going on the NFT side worth noting?
NFT markets are pretty down over the week following the market itself, with Pudgy's actually being back to a 9.1 ETH floor, Apes being a 13.15 ETH, Zuki is a 2.6 ETH. So everything is in a significant downtrend there. The thing that's actually holding up pretty well nonetheless are punks, which are still sitting at 38.44 ETH. And yet again, another weekend where we've seen a couple of above floor interesting punk sales going through, including this one, which was bought by Xier, which has been hunting for quite a while. So interest only seems to exist in the upper echelons of NFTs for punks. But other than that, it is following the market down right now.
Good point. Appreciate that. Thanks for that.
I think I've been meaning, I'm sitting on a lot of NFT bags still. I've been wondering, when I looked back at the historical 2021 chart stuff, it was always like native asset goes up, then the NFTs go up, and then native asset goes down, and then NFTs go down because the denominations are different, right? So native assets in dollars denominated, and then NFTs are native asset denominated. So there's always a little correlation there. And I've been like, if one were to rotate from NFTs to native assets, and if, the best time to do it is probably when the native asset goes down, because in dollar terms, because then the NFTs recover a little bit, on a native asset basis, and then you can try and catch the next wave up on the dollar pump of the native asset, and then rotate that to cash, and then you win. I haven't done any of that, but that's my mental model of how, if I were someone that was in my position with those bags, how I would have to maximally rotate out to cash, sell off at some point. So I am watching these dip days as are these days where I try to grab as much native asset as I can for some of my NFT purchases.
I think I really like that idea, and I think that is accurate if two things are true. One, that people are actually in reality valuing the asset by dollars, because that means as the asset goes down in as ETH goes down, for example, it means that it will become worth more in ETH. So you can kind of grab more ETH if people are valuing it in dollars. And actually, I think that's just the main thing. I think that's what needs to hold true. And I'll give you an example of that at the moment. So for example, something I watch closely because I'm an investor is, oops, wrong screen. Is that my screen? Oh no, we need to go to my screen. Legendary, can we switch screens to my screen?
That is your screen that you're sharing. It's not mine, I think. There we go. Wait 1 second. Yeah,
maybe it's my screen.
There we go. So yeah, the Infinex patrons seem to be trading at a dollar value of around 4 to 5K. And at one point in time, they were 1 point something K, but ETH was at 1 point something ETH, but ETH was at 3K. And so if you were to believe, if you were super bullish on ETH here, the ETH amount has gone much higher. If you think it's going to continue to dip, you might think that might be a nice time to exit. But then having said that, if you're super bullish on the protocol and what they're doing, then it might not be worth it. But for things which are art, I can see how that definitely makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah. The patrons are a little different because you have two exits, right? One exit is airdrop or whatever claim from the actual protocol itself. and then you have ETH exit. Whereas all the other stuff, basically, like ETH is your only exit, or Solana is your only exit. So you have to try to maximally time like when it pumps in native asset terms. So I'm just trying to think of like mental model wise, because like again, when I look back at historical charts, like if the native asset runs, like you're just getting fucking murked on the NFTs because you're pinning that to dollars, which means like everyone kind of pins it to dollars, which means that you're getting goosed there. So trying to figure out that best moment for that. In one of these moments when you think you're in an uptrending market, like you're trying to catch it on a down dip of the native asset.
Yeah. And the second assumption, I guess then, is that you have to be bullish on that underlying asset in order to want to grab more of it. So if you think ETH here is really undervalued and you can grab
not even that you have to be bullish on it, because like if that's your only asset, then your goal should just be to grab as much as you can. If that's your only exit out of the position is like that asset, you should try to maximize that, right?
It's a pretty weird concept. It's a pretty weird concept if you think about it. Like if you think that ETH is kind of the decentralized app store, and you are a developer on Apple and you're developing your app for the iPhones, iPads, whatever, and then basically the revenue that you make is tied to Apple's stock price, and if that's up and you achieve like a higher revenue because of the stock price being up, and if revenue goes down, or if the stock price goes down, so does your revenue, because it's tied to that. Like in real world, it's a pretty weird situation. Yeah.
Speaking of that, do you guys see Coinbase is on chain now?
Say it again.
Coin, the stock, is on chain now.
Yeah, I saw there was a team that did that. It's not like an official
it's like
one,
it's tokenized, I think is what it's called, or something like, or backed or something. But yeah, I saw like Kane from Infinex did like say, hey, I just swapped $50,000 for the tokenized coin, which is the representation of the stock. So that, the company owns the stock, but you get the dollar equivalent of it on chain.
Yeah, I thought that was very cool. We were talking about that just the other day. One other thing on the asset thing, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this. Punk6529, who I'm sure most people know, but if you don't, one of probably the biggest NFT collectors in the space, spoke about how he was allocated over the weekend, just yesterday. Spoke about his kind of history, how he started as a kind of Bitcoin maxi, faded ETH at the beginning, then kind of understood it a bit more, and then discovered NFTs. And he spoke. It's an interesting read, because I think I've been thinking something similar recently, but this articulates it really nicely. He describes now, he actually doesn't hold much ETH anymore, but he describes now the feeling of needing to part with the asset as one of the ways that you can, I don't think he puts it like this is my reading, the feeling that you feel when you think of departing with the asset is one way which you can measure its value in some way. So like initially, the feeling of getting rid of Bitcoin was like horrible. Like when he was selling Bitcoin for ETH or selling Bitcoin for NFTs, felt really, really bad, because you really, really value that thing. And interestingly, the way he views it now is Bitcoin feels really bad to sell still. ETH is actually just something that you can't hold because you just want to spend it all the time. But there's no like feeling bad about spending it. Like it's there to spend. Like that's what it's there for. You go and you use ETH to buy all this stuff. And however, the interesting flip maybe is that with NFTs, it manages to elicit, at least for him and maybe others too, it managed to elicit that same feeling of feeling terrible for needing to part with it. And I just think it's an interesting way to look at these variety of assets and think why I think some of the smart people have went so hard into NFTs, because that bracket of art speaks to people in a different way and can probably accrue value in a different way that might even be, I think what he describes it as, even harder to part with than BTC now, even if it doesn't appreciate as much, because it speaks to you on a different level. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. I wanted to share. I don't know if you guys got any thoughts on that. Did you see that? What did you think?
Didn't see it previously. I think it kind of ties into something you have been mentioning a couple of times over the last weeks, that if you're bullish on an ecosystem, you don't necessarily need to be bullish on its token, but that we often put both of them in the same like thought and in the same, in the same thought and same bucket ultimately. But that is like, obviously with NFTs, like even more difficult to separate that because of the emotional attachment, but obviously also with the history of ETH, like if you've been around for a couple of years or 8 years, or whatever, in my case, you've been holding that asset and see that grow and you love the ecosystem, and separating that from the asset price or separating that from the tokenomics and what you think about the underlying asset can be super hard. I didn't see the thread previously, but I definitely did bookmark it because I do like Punk6529's longer writings.
I think his emotion's just coming because ETH price action sucks. If ETH wasn't going down, you would feel bad about getting rid of it. That's how it always works, right? Like the number's going up, you feel bad getting rid of it because you think it's going to go higher perpetually, like everyone does. Bitcoin has been going up, so like therefore you don't want to get rid of it because it feels bad, right? Same thing. ETH would do the same thing if it had structural like upward swing momentum, whatever, and you would have those same bad feelings. So I don't buy the like, oh, I'm just used to spending it, because like that is technically going to apply to literally every smart contract platform. Like they're all meant to be spent like as the native asset. So I think it's just a byproduct of the price action.
Maybe that's part of the point though, Brad, because every smart contract platform, the token's meant to be spent, but Bitcoin, although it is obviously a blockchain, it's not really meant to be spent in the same way, or for whatever reason, that's where it's kind of shaked out.
Yeah, I guess it's training the muscle, right? Like it's same thing, because like you get that same emotion going to the grocery store, right? Like handing over a piece of cash is like it evokes a different emotion than like swiping your credit card, right? Because you're physically giving something over, right? Like there's like that transaction is a thing. So like, and then training that muscle, continuously doing that thing over and over and over, I guess like maybe numbs it to you a little bit. But yeah, I still think, no, man, I don't buy it yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe my key not takeaway from that thread, because it's something I've been thinking about for a while, is that as part of the portfolio allocation, I've definitely been more convinced, like it doesn't matter what happens to ETH prices to me necessarily, but like the digital art thesis and just art in general is something which I've been thinking about loads more. And I've been always trying to I tell myself this cycle, I wasn't going to do it as much as I did last year, because it definitely was one of the things that almost wrecked me. But I've like been buying pieces from people, in both physical stuff and digital stuff, because I think the art thing is fantastic, to be honest. I really enjoy it. And proven to be, I think, a good investment. But Funky, your hand is raised. Curious to get your thoughts here. I've kind of digressed. I'm not sure where you want to come in on, whether it's ETH as value, art as value, spending Bitcoin. What are your thoughts here?
Jam fam. Yeah, no, I mean, first I just want to start off with, I love that thread. I thought it was amazing. And as soon as I read it, within a few minutes, I actually quote posted it, and then he reposted my quote post. And he did it for several other people who kind of resonated with the thread. So, because I said something very similar, that insofar as mostly BTC, I totally understand the NFT thing, you know, like Kitty King, right? It's not a super popular collection. It's not a Pudgy. It's not a Punk. It's not anything. But as an older guy with 2 cats, like it just, well, I used to have 2 cats. It just really, really has this strong emotional connection for me. Like I am Kitty King kind of thing. So I totally get that. And Bread, you know, to the point he was making, he does say that like ETH is above other fungible coins. Because when you read the thread, it's like 30 posts long. You know, he says like other fungible coins he doesn't give a shit about at all, right? And ETH is a little bit different, but still talks about the spending thing. You know, just, and I think because he's an NFT guy at the end of the day, and he talks about some of these Grail purchases that he has and everything else, I think it's a great thread. I really love his personal takes, and that's kind of what my quote post was about. And yeah, he's just a great person, and I couldn't believe that he actually reposted my quote post.
There we go. Let's go, Funky. Good stuff. Yeah. Look, I think it's an interesting reflection. It just made me think, Brad, remember that time when we were talking about like, is ETH money or not? Like, what is it? Is it money or whatever? And I started to come to the conclusion, or the thing that I was started to put forward was, if ETH is money, then why do I need it? Like, because in the real world, I need money to spend, to buy things, to buy assets. And I actually started to get into my head a little bit more like, well, why don't I just spend the ETH, either buy NFTs or art, if I think that that's the cool thing? if ETH is money, which I guess was at least at one point in the time people wanted to push that idea, and I know there's different narratives available to ETH to try to capture. But yeah, that was the kind of question I was putting out there.
Why do you acquire regular money? Like you just get to spend, right? Like you acquire bushels of dollars so that you can spend the dollars, because the things denominated in dollars go up and down. It's the same game, right? Like that's the moneyness thesis. The cool, hot, weird shit is denominated in the asset. Therefore, you should acquire a bunch of the asset to do future things in it, right?
And that's the exact, I guess, one of the question marks against Solana at the moment, which is it was the money that you needed to participate in all of the Sol Casino, and it doesn't need, people don't necessarily need that at the moment. Activity is significantly down. I think I saw pump fund revenue down to only $600,000 a day, which
how will they survive?
Heart goes out to them. $500,000 only per day. But look, interesting stuff. Kind of got a little bit philosophical there on this down day, but let's get into I need to do the roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening to get you up to speed, and then we'll get into the main headlines. I think the big stuff, the big ticket stuff on the big price action and some other interesting news. So Binance actually delisted some market makers for misconduct the other day. I think there's some shady activity going on the market making side. Bitcoin financial services company Fold added another $41 million of Bitcoin to the balance sheet. Bitwise makes its first institutional DeFi allocation via Maple Finance, signaling a new era for on-chain credit. This was something that happened over the weekend, which I don't know if people necessarily picked up on. Original Doge owner launches official new dog coin, Kokoro. Surges to $100 million before a pullback to 25. All officially launched, officially verified. Maybe this is the way. Official animal coins only. This is the only way that the trenches will make money. And then finally, Infinex launches on BNB chain to allow certain BNB coin trading. That's that. Let's just get into the main headlines because we've spent some other time talking about some other stuff already. The first main headline is that, of course, Bitcoin is selling off seemingly after really positive news on Friday, right? I think people were super happy with the news on Friday. I think it was received very well in general. For people, just for some context, Bitcoin reserve was announced. It was announced that no, the government would not be would not be selling any of the Bitcoin which the Fed already has, or the government already has. They would be pursuing or looking to pursue ways to accumulate more, so long as that was done so in a a budget neutral way, so that they don't have to spend taxpayer dollars to do that. And then there was also going to be this digital asset stockpile in addition, which they're going to do an audit, figure out what other assets they're holding, and that's the side of the portfolio that will be like maybe more actively managed. They have some scope to sell those if they need to. So people thought that was pretty decent, I think, in general. However, price action is obviously not followed. I think there's a few reasons for that, which we'll just touch on quickly, and maybe some quotes, which maybe is hitting home the reality of maybe the more broader economic reality at the moment. So I think there's been a lot of talk about decreased government spend via Doge cuts, decreased spend via decreased involvement in Ukraine. There's obviously the increased tension created from that further uncertainty in geopolitics, which markets clearly do not like. And in general, I think they're being pretty obvious and clear that they want to get rates down, which means that there's going to have to be some hardship. So there are two specific quotes on this, which I think the market is digesting at the moment. Over the weekend, the president said there could be a little disruption when asked about the economy. He said, you can't really watch the stock market. If you look at China, they have a 100-year perspective. We go by quarters. What we're doing is building a foundation for the future. Now, I think everyone probably realistically knows that, yes, they do look at the markets. They're not looking at the markets. So, you take that with a pinch of salt. But I think that is an indication of trying to prepare people for there being some disruption either way. And then the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, said explicitly over the weekend, they're trying to get rates down. Could we see the economy we inherited to start rolling a bit? Sure. And then finally, the market and the economy have become hooked, become addicted to excessive government spending, and there's going to be a detox period. So I think what they're signaling, or the way that they're talking quite clearly, is to prepare people for a period of time where the market does not perform as well as it has before. I think they're trying to prepare people for it not doing as well. So crypto naturally is going to react. And so no matter how bullish the announcement was on Friday, kind of underscoring Bitcoin's importance to, or underscoring Bitcoin's value as part of the digital asset ecosystem, you know, I think we're going to move with the market a little bit here, which is a little bit wants to be risk off, I think, at the moment until things get sorted out. That's the headlines there. Those are my thoughts. Legendary, be curious to hear yours. We've got Stats up on stage as well, and Funky, of course. We'd love to come to you guys as well in a moment.
It's interesting to see this part of very explicitly saying we are trying to get the rates down, which is obviously something that has to be decided by the Fed. And if you then again look at some of the statements that Jay Powell has made last week, he's been saying interest rates are on hold as there's this rise in economic uncertainty. And specifically also mentioned the tariff policies and other economic policies by Trump, which bring a lot of volatility and a lot of quote unquote, especially the trade policy uncertainty around the changes and the likely effects remains high. For that reason, the Fed wants to take a bit more of a patient approach to just wait and see what Trump will do and how that plays out. So we'll definitely see a bit of a power fight or power struggle going on there, completely abstracting away from BTC and cryptocurrency prices, more so going into the actual economics and also into the stock markets. Generally, also, Jay Powell said that the US economy is still looking good, job data, etc., is still looking good. But obviously, now that volatility that we've seen with BTC is also showing quite strongly, actually, in the Nasdaq as well.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I think I agree. There's the presidency and Powell are not necessarily aligned, right? I think that's been a battle waiting to happen for a while, since the administration definitely want to get rates down, maybe sooner than they can afford to go there. Sam, welcome to the stage, my friend. How are you doing? What are your thoughts here? I know you've been fairly vocal about how some of this stuff has been playing out. How are you seeing it at the moment? What are your thoughts?
I mean, look, on the two topics. First, you know, the Fed's mandate is to control inflation. So that's what Jerome Powell is going to pay attention to. And I don't know how much any of this stuff takes down inflation. So like the idea we just want to destroy the economy for the sake of lowering interest rates, I don't fully buy that. I think this administration has always cared about the stock market, but right now they really want their tariffs and a few other things, and markets are paying the price for it. So you can maybe kind of put some rose-colored glasses on and say this is all about lowering rates. I just don't know if that's it feels inconsistent with the way they've talked about things in the past. I don't think Friday was bullish, though. I disagree with you on that. The reason I say that is because I think we have the price of Bitcoin went up 50% after the election. Why? Because people knew that Trump would be very positive towards the crypto industry. He knew that he'd try to reform the banking system to allow more crypto usage. Like all these catalysts that are coming out, and these positive statements are the reason that the Bitcoin price rallied 50%. And in the face of NASDAQ down since the election, where Bitcoin's still up a lot. So I think a lot of the things that we're celebrating are basically the things the market expected. I think there's always this binary, though, of will the government buy Bitcoin? Will the government find a way? Like this whole thing of taxpayer neutral makes absolutely no sense, because it's not like, it's like every dollar is the taxpayer's dollar. Like even if you sell gold, that's still taxpayer dollars. So how's it taxpayer neutral to then use that money to buy Bitcoin as opposed to paying off a multi-trillion-dollar debt? It's weird how we've been so obsessed with this deficit that we have, but now we're saying that any incremental dollar should go to buying Bitcoin as opposed to paying off the deficit. So every dollar, like no dollar is taxpayer neutral. I think the question that's been on people's mind, will the US government buy Bitcoin? And if the government buys Bitcoin, will it become a thing where all other countries feel like they feel pressure to buy Bitcoin? Well, all the states feel pressure they have to buy Bitcoin because the USA is buying Bitcoin, adding to their stockpile, trying to build up a bigger and bigger position, and no one wants to get left behind. To me, that's been the bull case, and that did not come out of it. Everything else, all these other gestures that are great for the regulatory environment, I think are the reason we've rallied. But the thing that would really set off the rise to like 200K to higher is this idea of kind of a race to buy more and assuming that other people would take that seriously and do that. And that didn't happen. So I think at the margin versus the things we already knew would kind of happen, it was actually a negative event. It was the catalyst we were waiting for. The thing we wanted didn't happen. And as I always say, anticipation is the oxygen of crypto. And I think with that event passed, it's like, okay, like what do we get excited about now? And I think that the market's starting to realize that the huge bull case we had in mind maybe isn't actually coming to play. So I did not hear that as bullish relative to what I think the timeline wanted.
Interesting. Appreciate the alternative take stats. I actually think there's like an interesting scenario where either the most bullish thing would be yes for the government to buy up all the stuff and kind of set that FOMO in for everyone else around the world not wanting to get left behind, or like a return to the original kind of ethos and spirit, which is maybe that if they were not involved and just continued on their spending plans the way that they have done before, and because Bitcoin has historically, and it would need to continue to do this, just tracked money supply. As that continues to grow, Bitcoin just keeps going up, irrespective of what the governments do. And I guess that's been the thing that's, I think up until this point, it's kind of tracked the money supply, but very, very short term, we've just got really, really attached to any federal, presidential, government tweet. Like everything seems to be hinged on this thing, which I don't know if it always was before, or I don't know if it would need to be always that way in the future, but definitely in this short to medium term, it's like entirely encapsulated by it. Like it's entirely intertwined with each other. Do you have any further thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, look, this whole money supply thing. First of all, like I think part of the idea of this administration is that it's not going to be super inflationary, and maybe now we're just realizing actually that's not true. But you also just said that their goal is to get interest rates lower, and the whole money supply thing is also true for Nasdaq. Like all those charts of money supply reflecting Bitcoin, it's just that's just basically saying Bitcoin's a risk asset, and risk assets broadly are doing poorly. But the idea that we're going to go away from this administration doing kind of unique things that pump the price of Bitcoin for us, like that is that is why Bitcoin has outperformed all assets since the election, is on this idea that there's specific things that this president's going to do that's going to pump the price. I think it's very possible. I still think he really wants the price to go higher, and he's extremely powerful. I think it's possible, but I think going back to it just being kind of like a high beta risk asset, which is kind of how I hear the money supply argument, like that would be negative because all of the risk assets are kind of tanking right now. And I think the market really did price in, what we have, some of the stuff we have gotten, but I think the question and the real book, and certainly for me too, look, I'm long Bitcoin, I haven't sold any, and I bought on the way higher, but I always thought it was because of this chain reaction I expected to happen. And that if we're just going back to being a normal risk asset, then I think that would at its core be negative, which is what the money supply argument I hear, because Nasdaq's also correlated, and Nasdaq's down a fair bit. So I don't know. It feels like people are kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth a little bit.
Appreciate it. Good to hear that side. I want to go to Funky as well, who I suspect is going to have maybe a more bullish and optimistic outlook. Funky, what is your thought here? How would you kind of think about how Sam is thinking about it, and how he's framed it?
No, I think Sam's brought up a lot of great points, honestly. I think that Jay Powell will bend the knee. It's only a question of when. I think another thing, like in the Hayes essay, the most recent one that he talks about, he gets at this. Jay Powell was put in on the first Trump, but then now they're kind of not on the same page. Dissent and others are going to try and pressure Powell. But I think the bigger macro picture is that they're also trying to restructure and refinance the debt itself, right? And they don't want to do that at whatever it is, 4%. right? Bringing down the rates and then trying to do those things after the fact may help in some sense and give them more runway. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, looking, it's tough because we have such a short attention span, such a short time horizon, on the timeline and so on and so forth. Do I think Clemente was a little bit harsh with the whole? Yeah, were they glazing each other at the announcement, the crypto summit? Sure, right. Like he had a crazy rant. If you guys didn't see that, but I think in the long run, assuming all this stuff plays out with the nation state FOMO over time, and I'm talking like decade plus, I think people will look back at that moment as something quite historic because of the pivot. And just to bring up, the stuff that Sam was talking about in terms of the tax net neutral strategy, something that I had talked about with you, B, on the timeline over the weekend was, is there a possibility in which they have no idea what they even hold right now, right? The government has to do this audit over the next 30 days to find out what sort of digital assets they have. And I just kind of was speculating and said, what if they have a bunch of XMR that they don't want to touch, right? Because Monero is seen as sort of this black box. Could they sell off those digital assets to then buy more BTC for the reserve? Again, this is complete speculation. No idea if this is going to happen, but that would be a way that's incredibly tax neutral for the citizens. I mean, we got to remember that those digital assets came from forfeitures and seizures from criminal activity. So, and in blockchain association, they've been talking about that. This is a really weird place to be in, right? Because you have these assets that were taken from people. Are some of these things like, could they ask for them back, right? I mean, look at Ross, right? Like in the whole free Ross thing. I mean, how much Bitcoin did they take away from him when they stuck him in jail, right? Like, does he now have a credible pathway to saying like, hey, I want my Bitcoin back? So even in blockchain association, they've been talking about what does this mean? What kind of precedent does this set? And so on and so forth. So it's interesting. I think on a long enough time horizon, this is all going to be bullish. But to Sam's point, it's definitely a sell the news event, right? A lot of this has been just a lead up to the anticipation. But of course, these things aren't going to happen overnight. We're dealing with, to quote Obama from back in the day, that, you're not driving a speedboat, you're trying to turn a battleship, right? And this is something that's going to take a long time to get done, whether it's the regulation, the legislation, so on and so forth. We're talking years before we get any kind of like substantive progress. To your point, B, maybe even by the time the midterms, will we really start to see something like this happen?
I also am not like my comments aren't like bearish on Bitcoin over the long haul. I just thought Friday was definitively bearish. Like a lot of times the timeline's like, we got this banking reform that we've wanted forever. 2 years ago, this would make price go up. What's going on? Markets are crazy. Markets down. I think they're missing the plot as far as like why Bitcoin's up 50% since the election versus everything else down, and what the market, like what would really make this market go higher. And I always thought that incremental thing was feeling like the treasury was just going to dump money into Bitcoin. And I think that's just the other thing that I took away from that announcement about making it taxpayer neutral was I do think that Dave Sachs and the administration got a lot of pushback from the announcement from the previous weekend, where they said like, hey, we're going to use, the Bitcoin reserves coming, and they talked about Cardano being on there and Solana, whatever, some of the top coins. But I think that they actually got a lot of pushback from their supporters and from a lot of like people who are big Trump supporters who I like a lot. Were like, this is just not a good use of taxpayer money. And I think that I kind of heard a bit of a reflex to that in the announcement when they were so serious about taxpayer neutral strategies, which is the first time I've seen them really get pushed back on their pro crypto strategies.
Yeah, and it sounded like they really walked back from that. Sachs's response when asking about that was that the only reason that they were mentioned was because they're in the top 5 or something like that, which didn't necessarily sound like a good reason to put it out in a tweet from the president's perspective. But interesting, very, very interesting conversation. Just on the point of, I think we've got to move on here, but I think Van Eck, I don't know if this is real news or fake news. Van Eck have proposed like 6 ways of how the government could accumulate Bitcoin in a way that doesn't affect the taxpayer. I can't find it here at the moment, but I did read that. So I'd be curious. I want to try and read that later to see what they have suggested. But look, that's obviously going on. That's going to keep going on. We'll stay on top of that news as it develops over the next few days and weeks and months, and who knows, maybe even years. Legendary, do you want to take us into the second bit of news? We've got 10 minutes left for the show. And then we want to hit Brad in the final part for the interesting article that was written.
Absolutely. It's been actually pretty interesting news coming out over the weekend. We had XAI Grok being suddenly associated with a token, the token being called DRB, with claims going around the timeline that Grok has launched its own token, which obviously garnered a lot of interest. That token went up pretty quickly to $20 million market cap before it corrected down, and is sitting at $13 million. And the actual story of what happened is pretty similar to what we've seen play out with AIXPT and Chaos. AIXPT, the agent, which has also, quote unquote, launched its own token as the result of an agent-to-agent interaction. And the same thing had happened between Grok and BankerBot, BankerBot being an AI-based DeFi tool. And someone tagged Grok, which recently has now started to respond when it's tagged, a feature that Elon Musk has shared on the timeline. Tagged Grok and said, suggest a name and ticker for deployment to BankerBot. BankerBot await Grok's response for info before proceeding. And Grok did respond saying it suggests the name Debt Relief Bot, DRB as the name, and DRB as the ticker, sorry. And this is exactly what happened. BankerBot did wait for that response and reply by Grok, launched the token, and that got shaped into the narrative by the timeline that XAI's Grok now has its own official token, something that Grok has been fighting against in obviously countless posts where it has been tagged and asked, is this your official token? Did you launch that? It seemed to understand what's going on with the agent-to-agent interaction. I did quiz Grok on that itself, but it's clearly pushing back on the notion that this is an official token. It has nothing to do with it, which is then again different from the reaction, also makes sense, that AIXPT had to it. AIXPT initially also refused its token, its own creation, Chaos, but then started to adopt it after 2 days of thinking on it. Just for reference, when Chaos launched, that was in December, the Chaos token did go up all the way to $30 million and has corrected down massively ever since, and is now trading at 1.2M.
I love it. Super interesting stuff. This seems to be
Look
the
at that
thing
second run, though, guys. See that? So we might have that second little bump coming once this thing, finds its way to the center of the earth, over the next few weeks. That's the play, right?
That's the hope, Brad. You just shared this in the comments, Brad. What were you saying here? So is this this is the wrong screen again. I'm trying to share my screen, Ledge, or maybe it's not working.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it basically was just an example of what Legendary was calling out, where like someone tagged it and said, "Hey, do you acknowledge it?" And said, "Yeah, of course, this is mine. I hope Elon will will give me attention and show that I actually did it. He'll come around eventually." So just the same games that we've been seeing.
I see. So is this just like are we running AIXBT back in a different way, basically, or Chaos?
Or giant
Yes.
or different magnitude, yeah. Although, does it like the novelty is gone for us, but is it gone for the broader market? And does the broader market give a shit to bid a token if they do find that to be the case, right? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's the right question. Grok, I saw a quick video that someone made on this, and one of the ways that they were trying to be more bullish on it was that just literally comparing follower accounts. So Grok has 1.2 million followers. AIXBT has almost 500,000.
So much. Therefore 40% bump on token price. Yep. I hate it.
That's how much the value
this entire industry thrives on comparative values. It's so, I guess it's just the world. That's just how humans work. Like we do in stock markets too, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But great summary there. Appreciate that. Let's keep it moving because I don't think there's more to necessarily go in on that. There's a cool article written here, Brad, from an old crypto Twitter legend. How do you want to set it up for us?
Yeah. So you said crypto legend. Yeah, this is Degen Spartan. He, I would say, belongs on like the Mount Rushmore of like crypto Twitter personas. He was someone who was known for anime girls and like being lewd and just like telling stuff how it is. He has the famous quote of that you may see on the timeline occasionally, where you guys risk spending every day of your life in an industry that you're not exposed to, or whatever. You're not being fully exposed to the industry you spend every day of your life talking about, right? So talking about us, frankly. So that's him. He's part of Egirl Cap. Egirl Cap is a collective of older degenerates from CT that would write long think pieces, do investments, stuff like that. Anyways, he has been gone for a while. Like he said, he just stabled up and fucked off. Frankly, a year ago, everyone like postulated that he was gone forever, dead, whatever. But he just dropped this article on the Egirl Cap website, and TLDR was that it's turned into a survivor's game in crypto broadly. He believes they summarize it pretty well up top, right? So he believes there are two types of games, and crypto has broadly gone from a winner's game, which is where victory is determined by exceptional skill beyond the expected play, and it's transitioned to a loser's game, which is victory is determined by just screwing up less than everyone else and letting everyone else blow themselves up, right? Go into the shitcoin casino and lose everything. And then he just goes into long form on that, and like why he believes that to be the case, and describes it with memes and some colorful language that I would recommend reading if you're used to CT. But that's basically the crux of it. It's just like the industry has become so extractive, and not extractive, but the industry has become so hostile to and active that you basically just have to not move too much, and you're probably going to beat 99% of the people in this industry, right? Like it is no longer you have the edge, and therefore that edge lets you win. So whether that's early days of the meme coin trenches, or last cycle when you're doing the food farms or whatever, where you have a meaningful edge understanding these contracts, these liquidity pools, the mechanisms underlying that let you outpace everyone else, to just like there's so much going on, and a lot of it is you're playing at a disadvantage, that just kind of sit on your hands, and you're gonna do fine above and beyond the average participant.
Yeah, it would be really good. Thanks for the summary, Brett. I think it was quite helpful at a time like this to reflect on that. I'm just going to read out one point, and then Legendary, maybe come to you for a final reflection as we close out. This is one of the quotes from the article. It said, anyway, my point is that a real tangible edge that you can manufacture for yourself and use to win is simply just not dying. Stay alive, and you'll slowly notice everyone around you tends to shoot themselves in the head too soon. You don't really need to do anything fancy or special to win. You don't need leverage, options, perpetuals, futures, etc., etc. In fact, you barely need to know or do anything. Expunge it all. Enjoy the eternal sunshine of a thoughtless mind. You just need to not do anything silly where everyone else PvPs, taking from each other and financially euthanize themselves. The weak are weeded out from the herd. The strong survive, and we live to die another day. Legendary, any thoughts on that mindset or outlook? How does that square with how you view things at the moment when it comes to taking advantage of opportunities in this kind of market, and like the market that we just were in versus now versus the next 6 months?
Kind of summarizes the financial nihilism that we're seeing pretty well, I think, especially after the meme coin casino. I do think that I mostly would agree with probably the best approach for a lot of people, for the majority, is to just not get screwed and just survive this game. But then again, I also think that there's like still a lot of opportunities to be had even in a market like that. And those opportunities can look like very different for different people. It can manifest in terms of a Kaido airdrop for someone like Brett. They can manifest in that Grok AI token, which if you caught that early, it still went up and it's still a good trade. So where the AVAX pre-sales, which a bunch of smaller creators who've been supportive of that have received as well. So I do think there's like good opportunities to chase, but the part that I very, very strongly agree with, the not screwing up part, and not taking unnecessary risks, and not playing around with leverage, and not thinking that you now have a read on Trump's policies and thinking that the right time to go 50x long or short on BTC and get crushed in the process of that. And we've seen that happen to a couple people. Most prominently coming to mind is Hanwei, very prominent trader who shared 1 month ago, I think it was on the Monday, where Trump had announced the first tariffs, that he got fully liquidated. Basically, his entire stack that he had on chain was gone on that trade. And I think just given how he traded Blur, that had to be an 8-figure stack. And I think ever since, he did not come back to post or say anything. So a lot of times we tend to try to think that we understand things that we don't fully understand yet, and maybe have this like Dunning-Kruger overconfidence attached to it. And then if you leverage trade, that's a very, very surefire way to get wrecked. And I agree that it's not a risk that you need to take necessarily, and then surviving is the way better option.
I think that's wise. I think my approach with the 2 cycle, we're kind of talking as if the cycle's over. I don't know necessarily that it is. Definitely needed a time to cool off after the meme coin mania. But if I look back at 2021 and I look back at what's just happened now, it's been like thoughtful risk taking in particular assets, and but like never really risking the huge stack of the core thing that you like. And actually, ironically, I've seen a few people writing about this. That can actually go bad for you as well. The pain of holding ETH, for example, this cycle, when you think that was the thing that is going to be the future of finance, and it performed the way it did over the last 4 years or 3 years, that's not necessarily outperforming anyone, right? Because it hasn't gone anywhere. So there's, it's always challenging to figure out the right mix of things. But I would say just by participating here and figuring out opportunities and trying to pursue your interests in this space has been incredibly profitable for, I think, all of us on stage and a lot of people in the audience that I can see as well. Like pursuing your interests here, there's just all kinds of opportunities. Clemente, when he was with us the week before last, it's a perfect testament to that, right? He said literally, creating in this industry in particular, it's just blue sky. No one else is going to do it as consistently as you if you want to be consistent, or go at it as hard as you if you're going to go at it hard. You've just got this blue ocean that you can explore and be rewarded for. So in agreement, that is the show for the day. Hope you enjoyed it as usual. Glad you joined us. Just a message, purely administrative for the people who are here. We're still 7 a.m. Eastern time every day. Time stays the same for Eastern time. If you're in Europe, we're obviously an hour earlier. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. I hope you've still managed to find us. But 7 a.m. Eastern time is the time we will be back again tomorrow as usual. Live on X Spaces, video, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Have a wonderful day. Thanks to Legendary, Bread, Sam, and Funky for joining us as usual. Have a wonderful day. Take care. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.